It's just a complete pleasure for me to welcome all of you tonight to this celebration and to honor and to hear from a former Big Apple mayor who made history, the Honorable David Dinkins, who is also a greatly respected member of our faculty, and we're very honored to have him here. His recent book, A Mayor's Life Governing New York's Gorgeous Mosaic, reflects a political career and dedication to public service in New York City. Winning the office in 1989, Mayor Dinkins earned the spotlight of national attention not only as the mayor of one of this country's most important cities, maybe the most important city, but also as the city's first African-American mayor. Mayor Dinkins established the Beacon Schools and instituted Safe Streets, Safe City, Cops and Kids, a program that fundamentally changed how police fought crime and expanded opportunities for children in New York City. He's had many major successes. I'd like to mention just a couple. First, he negotiated a deal that kept the U.S. Open Tennis Championship in New York City, bringing hundreds of millions of dollars to the city, and he also launched the revitalization of Times Square after decades of decay. Another important initiative that maybe he doesn't get enough credit for is the city's famous decline in crime. Indeed, this decline in crime continued under Rudolph Giuliani, but it also very clearly began under David Dinkins. Today's talk will be facilitated by Dr. Ester Fuchs, Professor of Public Affairs and Political Science. Professor Fuchs is one of our most prolific scholars and practitioners and has consistently played a major role in bringing the most compelling public policy and urban issues to the floor and to this campus. She is no stranger to the inner workings of city government, having also served as Mayor Bloomberg's special advisor for governance and strategic planning through his first term in office. We are extremely fortunate here to receive the benefit of her knowledge and her experience as director of our Urban and Social Policy Program. Professor Fuchs will be moderating this discussion with Mayor Dinkins. Please join me in welcoming both of them and congratulating the mayor.
Well, thank you, Dean Jano. This is so wonderful that we're all here today. I'm going to make this mic blow out, I'm sure, because I'm so excited.
We call Local 3. We're going to.
It's really a rare pleasure to read your biography, Mayor Dinkins, not just because it's your personal story, but as everybody who knows the mayor and everybody who's read even one page of this masterful book, and by the way, Peter Nobler is here today, who worked on the book with Mayor Dinkins, and we want to welcome him and thank him. But your biography is inspirational, and I know that's a word people use over and over again, but it really is inspirational, and that's something I want us to talk about this evening. I'm really so glad you agreed to have a book party at SIPA, and that our students, and I know we're a lot of faculty here today too, but really it's our students who I want to make sure get to listen to your story and ask their own questions of you. They do get to do that in your classes that you teach here, which we've been fortunate to have over the past, I don't know, how many years?
Since 94.
Since 94.
Since I lost my other job.
And so Mayor Dinkins teaches a course every semester that our students can register in and get the wisdom of his experience in New York City and around the globe. But the one thing I wanted to emphasize before I ask you your first question is, you know, the book is, of course, first and foremost your personal story. But it also reflects the sweep of American history. The sweep of American history is infused in every page of this book. And it's not just because you were elected the first African-American mayor of New York City. We all know that. It goes back to the beginning of your story, to growing up in Trenton, New Jersey. Who knew you grew up in Trenton, New Jersey? We all thought, you know, you grew up around the corner here in Harlem, but he did grow up in Trenton, New Jersey. And that's where I'd like you to start. Could you just tell us a little bit about where you first started out, about growing up in Trenton, about a place where segregation still defined American society? That's where you grew up, and that was in the Northeast, not in the South. And yet you graduated high school, enlisted in the Marines, graduated Howard University as a mathematics major. That always makes me so nervous when I realize you were a math major, since I can't really do math. And of course, later on went to Brooklyn Law School. But it really all starts in Trenton. So can you just tell us a little bit about growing up in Trenton?
Well, I will. I'd be delighted to. First, I want to thank the dean. Thank you so much. And I know the dean has had a long day because we had a meeting of our advisory committee early this morning, and so she's been on the stick a long time today, and I'm very pleased at your willingness to do this for us. And you, good friend Esther. Esther has took me by the hand when I came here in '94 and said, "This is a classroom, those are students," sort of like that.
Don't believe him at all.
So I'm fortunate, I truly am. But I was born in Trenton in 1927. You see, it was the Depression years. I'm old. I explain to people, if you're closer to 90 than you are to 80, then you're old. And that's where I am. And my mother and father were from Newport News, Virginia. My little mommy was about 5'1", 5'2", and was co-captain of the girls' basketball team at Huntington High School in Newport News, Virginia. And we were poor, but I didn't know it. And then there came a time when my mother and father separated. I guess I must have been 6 or 7 years old, and my mother came here to New York. She was a domestic. She and her mother, my grandmother, they cooked and cleaned for folks for, I guess, $1 a day. So I was poor as hell, but I didn't know it. I never went to bed hungry. My clothes were clean because they scrubbed them. Didn't have holes because my mother and grandmother sewed them up. And they taught me that you're supposed to be polite to people. And if I met someone on the street when I was walking with my mother and an adult and I called by their first name, boy, I got dressed down good. You just did not do that. And if I, in Trenton with my father, and then later in New York with my mother and grandmother, if I didn't behave as I should, they wouldn't lay a hand on me, just look at me and tell me how hard they worked. About 30 seconds, I'd be in tears, except one occasion. In New York, they used to have skate scooters. I look around the audience, I think maybe 1 or 2 of you might be old enough to remember skate scooters. It was a soapbox on a 2x4 with a skate on the front and a skate on the back. You don't, I know you don't remember. And so if you wanted a real skate scooter, if you really were down, you put reflectors on it. But you didn't buy these reflectors. You liberated them from license plates. So we were out liberating some reflectors from license plates on one occasion. And a police officer came along in plain clothes, chased us, it caught me, I guess because I was the smallest. But instead of taking me to the precinct, he took me home to my mother and grandmother. They took all my clothes off and stood me up in a bathtub and beat me with straps. I have not stolen a reflector since. But that's the only, otherwise they would never lay a hand on me. They would just say, Dave, we worked so hard. But I was really a fortunate child. And in those days, at 125th Street and 8th Avenue, at that intersection, they had push carts lined up from which they sold fruit and vegetables. But they wouldn't give you a shopping bag, you had to buy one. So I don't know how old I was, maybe 8 or 9. And I would go to a wholesaler and I'd buy shopping bags, 3 for a nickel, and sell them at 2 cents a piece. Took a while, but when I finally got about 10 or 15 cents, I went and bought something for my mother, and I was the proudest little fellow you ever saw.
You know, Mr. Mayor, the stories are, you know, so profound, and I can hear not just your personal story, but in some sense, you hear the American dream materializing in your life. And so you grew up in Trenton, and you were optimistic and you were positive, and you were able to sign up for the Marines in World War II when the Marines was, as far as I can tell from the history, weren't particularly open to black men at the time. How did you do that?
Well, you have to envision, I'm 17 years old, I'm little, and I'm a senior in high school, and I'm going to turn 18 on the 10th of July. And upon attaining age 18, you had to register for the draft. Everybody was going to war. There was no such thing as like going to Canada as they did in Vietnam. I mean, everybody went, and everybody expected to go. And so you'd go to the movies and you see what in those days they called newsreels. And you'd see troops hitting the beach and being shot at and whatnot. And I figured, well, the way to increase my chances of survival is to be well trained. And the way to be well trained is to be a Marine. I'd never heard of the Army Rangers or the Navy SEALs. They may not have even had them in those days. This is 1945. So I set out to enlist. The idea was to enlist before I turned 18, because once you turned 18, you register for the draft, and then you say, where do you want? You say Army, they give you Navy. Say, yes, for Navy, they give you Army. Whatever you, the only way to get the branch of service you wished was to enlist. So I found out that, one, there was no recruiting office in Trenton where I was then living. And so not in this order, but I went to these places, Jersey City, Newark, New York, Camden, Philadelphia. And I was either told, we have our quota of Negro Marines, what they call us then, or you have to go to the state of your residence. So I just pestered the guy in Philadelphia. I hounded him. I guess he looked more vulnerable than the others. And I just stayed after him, and finally he let me fill out the papers and take the exam. And he told me I had high blood pressure. Naturally, I didn't believe it. I said, some more of this damn discrimination. See, there were no blacks at all in the Marine Corps prior to 1942. None. So at any rate, he sort of succumbed, and he wrote a letter to my draft board and gave me a copy. He said, if this man passed the test and selects the Marine Corps, put him in. That's how I got in the Marine Corps. But there was, as Esther pointed out, that there was discrimination in Trenton. We used to say that New Jersey is the first cousin of Georgia. Things weren't by any means perfect, but I hadn't seen anything like I later witnessed in the South. It's a very long story, but there came a time when I was separated from the other Marines, the recruits, and we're going to Montford Point Camp, Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. The white recruits were to Parris Island, South Carolina. So there came a time when you get off the train in Washington and then you get a bus. And I stepped up to the window to get a ticket, and the clerk said, "Around the back, boy." And that was my first real experience with Jim Crow in the South. Anyway, eventually I got to Jacksonville, North Carolina. I got a bus into Montford Point Camp, and a big sergeant asked me for, "Where are your orders?" And I launched into this long explanation, and he hit me. And that was my introduction into the United States Marine Corps. It was an experience that I will never forget, and a decision that I will never regret. It was the smartest thing I ever did. But because the war ended while we were in training, in what they call boot camp, the drill instructor is the guy who takes you from early morning to late at night and drills you and dreams up things for you to do, like hang up wet clothes. They run around these till they dry, you know, things like that. And you've seen soldiers do what they call a manual of arms, you know, right shoulder. We used to do that with locker boxes. So one day he came in, he said, "Get down on your knees and thank God the war is over." They said, "Now get up, nothing's changed." And nothing had changed. But black Marines and black soldiers and Tuskegee Airmen, I know you all know about Tuskegee Airmen, we were treated less well than were Italian and German prisoners of war in the South during the war. Imagine that. And then after I got out of the service, I went to Howard University, and the nation's capital. Now, I never saw combat, but some of my classmates had. Some of them had shrapnel in their bodies, but we couldn't shop on F Street or go to the movies downtown. After the war to end all wars, the war to make us free. So you learn. So sometimes when people ask me, do we still live in a racist society? Are things better now? And I always respond the same way. Dr. King's dream has not yet been realized. Things are not what they should be, but thank God they're not what they used to be.
It's such an amazing transition for you, going from the Marines and then to Howard. And then I want to bring you a little forward in the story in meeting your bride, Joyce. I know we can never leave Joyce out of the story. I hope the record shows that we're going to talk a little bit about Joyce,
my bride,
who the mayor married in 1953.
That's 60 years for those of you who are counting.
And Joyce takes you to Harlem and to the beginning of your political career. And I want you to tell us a little bit about those early days in Harlem and the Democratic Party and J. Raymond Jones. But before you answer that question, could you tell, please, the ditch digger story, because it's my favorite. So indulge me.
Okay. Well, when I was in office as mayor, my bride, Joyce, that's her name, Joyce, we were riding along in a city limousine, and I see a fellow with a shovel digging the ditch. I said, "Joyce, isn't that fellow you used to date?" said, now, I'm not knocking ditch digging because I have dug ditches. I mean, I truly have. One summer I worked with what's called a general contractor, and I dug ditches. I've waited tables, washed dishes, worked in factories, shined shoes. I've had all kinds of jobs. I mean, I really, truly have. So I said, honey, I'm not knocking, but that is the fellow you used to date, isn't it? She says, yes, matter of fact, it is. I said, see, if you'd married him, you'd be the wife of a ditch digger. She says, no, if I'd married him, he'd be mayor.
Thank you, thank you, and thank you, Joyce, because truly, I have to say, and I know you agree, because of her, that is one of the reasons you became mayor of New York. But I want you to tell us all about the Harlem Democratic Party, J. Raymond Jones, and how you really launched your political career.
Well, I decided to go to law school after I had won a fellowship to Rutgers University in math. And by then I was a serious student, because for the first year and a half I didn't even want to go to college. And my motto was, don't let your education interfere with your recreation. But when I finally got to be a serious student, and I won this fellowship, and now here I am, I'm living in Trenton, riding a train to New Brunswick daily to study math. I stayed up most of the night working on the problem and got what I thought was the correct answer. Came to school, went to the smartest person in the class, of course was a woman, and she really was. And I said, do you get the answer number 2? She said, yeah, pi over 3. I said, that's what I got. Then as an afterthought, I said, how long did it take you? She said, about 20 minutes. Then I knew. I came home and I told my father I'm going to drop out. He said, what are you going to do? I said, I don't know, Pop, but I know what I'm not going to do. So I decided to go to law school. Now, with all due respect to any lawyers in the house, you don't need to be too smart to be a lawyer. Now, that's not to say that there aren't some lawyers who are brilliant, but the converse is what I speak of. So I'm in law school now. I'm going to Brooklyn because I was a Dodger fan. Now, the real reason I went to Brooklyn was that Brooklyn was one of the few schools that would admit you if you had to work. And I got married in August and started law school in September. And we're living in Harlem, poor as hell. And so I worked at night, went to school during the day. And I could have done the reverse and worked during the day and gone to school at night, but then it would take 4 years instead of 3. So I opted to do the other. And when I passed the bar right away, and but I continued working my night job, which was in a liquor store. And finally, when I could give up that job, I joined a political club. That was the networking of that day. Because if I perhaps had a contract, a client that required knowledge of a contract, my client might want to lease the corner candy store, but the person next to whom I sat in school and explained contract law to, he or she, they had a client, it was a string of muffler shops. Why? That's who they knew. And the people I knew were corner candy store types. So I joined the political club. I joined the famous Carver Democratic Club with J. Raymond Jones, known as the Fox. And this is about 1958 maybe. And then in '65, Ray, smoking a big cigar, came out and said, boy, you want to run for the assembly? I said, I guess. So my opponent was Franz Leichter.
Oh, God.
Franz and I have been friends ever since. But he was from the Riverside Independent Democrats at 106th and Broadway. The district that we ran in stretched from 150th to 108th Street along the west side. And now I'm coming from the clubhouse, and France is from Riverside Independent Democrat. So to make me look a little better, we got Dr. Kenneth Clark, you know, Brown versus the Board of Education.
Yeah.
It happens that he was a client of our law firm. And so he became the chairman of my citizens committee. And even so, I got killed in Morningside Gardens, but Grand Houses pulled me through. And I won. And in those days, political clubs, Rays at least, did a lot of very positive things. I don't mean just turkeys at Thanksgiving or Christmas, but they helped people find jobs and did things of that sort. And Ray was proud of the fact that your humble servant excluded, he always backed quality candidates. Constance Baker Motley, Skiz Watson, James L. Watson, who became a federal judge, Ken Clark, he was one of the first regents of color. And so Ray was very proud of that. And it was at this time that, in and around this time at least, that I met Percy Sutton and Basil Patterson and Charlie Rangel, and it's another long story, but they got to call us the Gang of Four. They did not mean it as a compliment, but we took it that way. And Percy was a visionary. Who, in 1977, he decided to run for mayor. Well, my black folks didn't run for mayor of New York. You kidding me? But he did, and did pretty damn well. It was a long list of candidates. It was Bella Abzug and Ed Koch and Mario Cuomo and Herman Badillo and one or two others. There was a bunch of folks. But Percy ran with such class and distinction in 1977 that nobody laughed at me when I dare try in '89. And we say everybody stands on somebody's shoulders, and for damn sure, because of what Percy was able to do, what Jesse Jackson did in 1988, registered a whole heap of folks, and I was one of the co-chairs of his campaign in New York. This helped us win in 1989.
So, Mr. Mayor, let's talk a little bit about 1989. I'm jumping over the borough presidency, and when we get to the questions, you all can ask him about the borough presidency. But I know everybody really wants to hear about 1989. First, a Democratic primary where you beat an incumbent mayor. Never happens. Ed Koch, the incumbent mayor. Then Jay Golden, who had been a controller, and then Dick Ravitch, who was still actually just came and spoke in your class. Amazing that the mayor can have the people he defeated come and speak in his class. You're the only one I know that can do that, frankly.
Well, we're all good friends, and Dick Ravitch is a wonderful man, a good guy, and but to appreciate 1989.
And then, of course, he beat Rudy Giuliani in the general election. So I don't want to gloss over that part.
But
so how'd you do it? How did you put together that majority coalition that no other African American was able to do up until that point? And that was significant then, because identity politics, as we like to call it in the social sciences, was a very strong factor in the city. And you needed to put together a coalition because you could not win with just a majority of black votes.
No, but it was a fellow named Bill Lynch who really got the job done. Bill had been my chief of staff when I was Manhattan Borough President, and I ran 3 times for Borough President, 77, 81, and 85 before I succeeded. People used to say to me, "What do you do?" and I'd say I run for borough president. So finally, I succeeded, and now I'm borough president. And as no one knows better than you, Esther, in those days, they had the Board of Estimate. And I won't bore you with all the details of that, but that's what gave a borough president real, honest-to-God power and authority. So now I've run 3 times. I'm borough president. It's an important job. I'm happy being borough president. And then Bill Lynch, a fellow named Bill Johnson, some others came to me and spread out the results of a survey that they had done with a lot of information in it that boiled down to I had, not that I would win, but I had the best chance of a lot of well-known names of seeking the office of mayor. Now, Ed Koch, by we I mean Percy Sutton and Basil Patterson, Charlie, we all supported Ed Koch in a runoff in 1977 against Mario Cuomo. And so now Ed had been a very liberal, progressive member of the city council and the Congress, and his first term at least as mayor. But by the time he got around to this last term, we were unhappy with him, and so we were looking for somebody to run against him. And I always try to phrase this so it doesn't sound like I'm suggesting that I was drafted, because that's not the case. But I determined to go, and with Dick Ravitch, Jay Golden, Ed Koch, the conventional wisdom was, since each is Jewish, even if I win, I won't get 40%. Their supporters would gang up on me, and I would lose in a runoff. Well, we got 51%. Now, I'm in a general election against Rudolph Giuliani, who is not yet America's mayor. 9/11 has not yet occurred. The Democratic enrollment is maybe 5-1 of Democrats over Republicans. So you figure I'm going to win. Well, I did win, but not by much. 1.9 million votes were cast, and I had a margin of about 50,000. Incidentally, about the same margin by which I lost in '93. So it was tough, and we were, in '93, we were very disappointed. Matter of fact, we had a press conference on election day because there had been complaints about white off-duty police officers intimidating people in line, saying such things as, do you have a driver's license? Have you ever been arrested? Things totally irrelevant to one's capacity to vote, to cast a ballot. So we had this press conference. So come election night, when the returns were in and we had lost, and I've got to go make a concession speech, and some of my folks were, I mean, they were really angry. And but some of my friends, Bill Lynch and Peter Johnson, others, they said, no, Dave, now you show them what you're made of. So I said, in this country, we don't have coups and revolutions. We have elections. Mayors come and mayors go, but the city must endure. How's real estate? Next morning, I looked at my bride. I said, you know what? We got less than 60 days. The election's in November. I'm out of office at the end of December. I said, I got less than 60 days to get out of Gracie Mansion, find a place to live, and a means to pay the rent, and simultaneously transition an entire government in a professional, responsible way. And all my people, they had the same problems I had. They had tuitions and mortgages and rent and on and on. But God bless them, to a person, they were terrific. And we handed to the Giuliani administration transition papers and everything. And so now I got to figure out how I'm going to pay the rent. My wife is very fussy, you know. She wants the rent paid and groceries in the house. Unreasonable woman. So then the phone started to ring. And it helps to have friends. Percy Sutton said, "How'd you like to do a radio show?" Yeah. He said, "Well, twice a week, live, call-ins, we'll pay you X." And I hesitated a half a second. He said, "Okay, X plus." Peter Johnson said to me, "Dave, you know, you ought to think about teaching at Columbia." Peter is a Columbia College, Columbia Law School graduate, one of my senior advisors, pro bono, never made 2 cents helping me. And so Peter says, "You ought to think about teaching." I said, "I haven't practiced law since 1975. And he said, No, SIPA." I said, "What's SIPA?" True story. And in 2 days, by 2 days I mean 48 hours, we met with the dean, the president of the university, and I've been here ever since. I just said they're looking stupid, and Peter's saying, "Well, former mayor's got to have an office. Former mayor's got to have this." But
you're the only person I know who doesn't take credit for everything that you do yourself. So I have to jump in here. I want to ask one last question, and then we'll open it up because I know there's a lot of questions. During your mayoralty, you had so many accomplishments. Could you talk to us a little bit about one or two of the policies that you feel really were what you're most proud of? I know there's so much and the time is short, but if you could, that would be great.
I'm going to tell you about Safe Streets, Safe City, but just before I do, I want to not fail to mention that when we had very little money, thanks to a fellow named Harvey Robbins, we spent $47 million to keep each branch library open 6 days a week. Now that may not sound like much, but it should when I tell you that hadn't happened in a quarter century. It was Harvey that kept saying to me, "We can do it."
You did it.
And we did.
You totally did it. People don't know that the libraries were shuttered during the 1975 fiscal crisis in New York City. And during the entire previous administration, no one thought that this was important for the city to reopen the libraries full time. And so it was critically important,
Well, Safe Streets, Safe City was our program for getting more police officers and related areas filled, and it came at a time when things were really rough. I used to, and still do, explain to people crime didn't commence on January the 1st, 1990. It was there the day before when Ed Koch was mayor as well. But the way it is written of these days, they sometimes say, "Let us not return to the days of Dinkins." Fact is, crime started to go down as early as '91 and made a bigger drop than any mayor has had ever. And it was because of Safe Streets, Safe City. Among other things, it gave us more police officers. If you need more cops, you need more DAs, and you need more legal aid, and you need more probation, and all the rest. Plus, we had a program that provided for what we called beacon schools, the use of schools beyond the hours of instruction, with programs designed by the community but paid for by the city. And to this day, we still have beacon schools, not just in New York, but elsewhere. And, but to get the money for this, as Esther, who's an expert in this area, will tell you, the city may not tax itself. Other than real estate, you got to get permission from Albany. So we went up and we said, look, people are dying in the street, and you know, we got to. And one Republican state senator said to me, Mr. Mayor, my constituency is concerned with auto theft and graffiti. Anyway, we won that battle finally, and crime did indeed dip. And it's one of the things of which we're most proud, although it is often suggested that there was no crime on December 31st, 1989, just January the 1st, 1990, when we took office.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's such an extraordinary story. I have so many more questions I would ask you, as you know, because I do that all the time, even without permission. But I want to open up the floor to questions from all of you. We still have some time to do that, and I know Mayor Dinkins would be happy to answer your questions. So I'm going to moderate a little.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. My name is Mark. I'm a SIPA grad from 2008. I took both your classes. And because of your classes, I actually work for the city myself now with the police department.
Ah.
And the question I had for you is, your former police commissioner is now really one of the most iconic police commissioners the New York City has ever had. But in the media, he gets a lot of flack, and so does the rest of the department, specifically around the stop, question,
Stop and frisk
issue. And my question to you is, if you could be mayor again tomorrow, how would you address what so many politicians are saying is a policy that has really lost focus?
Okay, that's, needless to say, that's an excellent question. I respond to questions about stop and frisk this way. I believe that in any segment of our society, school teachers, firefighters, police officers, priests, rabbis, any segment of our society, is a certain percentage that will misbehave, not play by the rules all the time. One group, it might be 1%. Another group, it might be 1/10 of 1%. Yet another group, maybe 1/100th of 1%. But somebody is going to misbehave. And if you figure you got, when you're talking about 30 to 40,000 cops, it figures that there's going to be some who will not do as they should. Usually when I'm explaining it this way, a reporter will say to me, well, in other words, and I'll say, no, sir, not in other words, in the words I just gave you. So the point is that I believe that community policing, as we employed it with Lee Brown and Ray Kelly, where you get police officers out of the patrol cars onto the community streets, so you don't have a circumstance like we had a few years ago when Reverend Dr. Calvin Butts, senior minister at Abyssinian Baptist Church, was stopped by a couple of cops on 138th Street, the site of Abyssinian Baptist Church, because they didn't know him. Now, they should have known him. And obviously, when he got to explain who he was and whatnot, they backed off. But you should never have that. Plus, we need the community trusting and believing in police officers. That's how, as I'm sure you must know, a lot of crime gets solved that way. But if people look the other way, see nothing, tell nothing, it makes it hard for everybody. And just finally, I think we should never ever have a rookie cop on the street without him being accompanied by a veteran. Now, this is not to say that a police officer who has years of experience can't misbehave also. I understand that, but it's far less likely. And the police department of the city of New York is the best in the world. I believe that. I've said that many times. I said that just prior to the police riot against me at City Hall Plaza in '93. It came because Chico Garcia had been killed in Washington Heights. They said he was a drug dealer. I don't know whether he was or not, but anyway, he was killed by police. And I was accused of, quote, coddling the drug dealer. The terrible things. And the cops misbehaved that day. Not all police officers, obviously, but some did. They overturned a vehicle. They referred to a black woman who was a member of the city council with the N-word. It was horrible. And to this day, nobody's ever paid a price for that. So, and of course, there's Crown Heights. These cops, who are the best in the world at riot situations, failed to contain those police officers, those young blacks who were attacking Jews. And even now, it is written on occasion that, well, in Crown Heights, you had this rioting resulting in the death of Yankel Rosenbaum. That's not the way it happened. Yankel Rosenbaum was stabbed within the first few hours. And the tragedy of Crown Heights is the death of Yankel Rosenbaum and Gavin Cato, the young black boy who was struck and killed by a car. But I'm glad that you are in the police department. That's good. That's very good. I'll claim some credit for you being there.
Okay, let's get the next question. Professor Greer.
Hi, Mr. Mayor. I'm looking forward to speaking to you on Wednesday on your radio show. So I have a question. I was on a panel a while ago with your colleague, Dorian Warren, and we started talking about sort of Obama, obviously, and mayors. And I said Obama oftentimes, talks about reading biographies about Reagan and Kennedy, and what he really needs to do is read a biography about Dinkins, right? Because there are certain specific challenges.
Go, girl.
But I wanted to know, what specifically would you give sort of black mayors coming up in the 21st century? Because we know that cities have changed. And when I started graduate school, someone, definitely not Esther, told me that cities were dead, right? People had left the cities and they were over cities. And so now we know that they actually are vibrant again. There's certain challenges that cities still face. But what would you give sort of younger mayors, especially mayors of color, coming up in this 21st century?
Well, thank you, Doctor. I think that it's really almost the same thing. People ask me, well, what advice would I give Bill de Blasio now? And as some of you doubtless know, he worked with us in City Hall, was recruited by Bill Lynch. His wife worked in our press office and speechwriting office. I say she used to make me sound intelligent. And people ask me now, and I supported Bill Thompson. But people ask me now, what advice would I give Bill de Blasio? And the advice is that I hope he finds a way to surround himself with bright young women and men, honest, no principal, no president, no governor, no mayor can do it all. You have to have persons to whom you delegate things and you rely on their judgment. If you have a fire commissioner, the mayor is not expected to be out at the scene of the fire telling them what diameter the hose should be. I mean, damn it, that's the job of the fire commissioner, et cetera, et cetera. And so now I'm not suggesting they have to all be young, because I do not believe that de Blasio should come in and sweep out everything that Mike Bloomberg had and all of his people. That would be a serious mistake. He should pick and choose. Not all will wish to stay, but some who want to stay he may want, some he may not want. But it is vital, I think, to have good people. We got things done, and we did get some things done. And we got them done not because I was taller, smarter, faster than everybody else, but because I had the good fortune of having a lot of really bright, intelligent, caring people. You didn't read about any scandals in our administration, and it sure in hell were a lot in some others.
Let's get the next question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is David Braham, a first-year student here at SIPA in International Security Policy. My question to you is, as a mayor of New York throughout your term, what was what you consider the toughest challenge you had to face as a mayor? And to fast forward to 2013, what is the toughest challenge you believe the city of New York has to face today? And if you believe that New York City, it's better than it was 20 years ago or not? Thank you.
Thank you. And welcome to SIPA. I think that there's some things that are better than they used to be, and some things that need a whole lot of work. I said just the other day in response to somebody's question about some of the things that Mike Bloomberg had been able to achieve, I pointed out that when Mark Green was my Consumer Affairs Commissioner, he conceived the notion that we ought to do something about smoking. And the way that he started out to attack it was to get the billboards out in ballparks that are in constant view of the television cameras to get them taken down. And we never got very far with that. Not that it was his fault, but maybe I didn't give him enough help. But we didn't get it done because their answer was, well, these are leased for X period of time and whatnot. But Mike Bloomberg decided to get rid of smoking, and people predicted all kinds of woeful things were going to happen. It hasn't happened, and people aren't smoking. You don't see as many people walking the street smoking as you do in Europe, for instance. And that's a good and yeah, sure, and that's a good and positive thing. So there's some things that we've improved on, and some things that we haven't. But I think that New York's the greatest city in the world. I'm obviously biased, but I hope that Bill de Blasio and all those who succeed him will care about people first. If you really care about people, especially our children, and that is among the most important things. We got to find ways to educate our youngsters. Now, Mike was able to get control of the education system. All the mayors before him, including your humble servant, we sought, as you may remember, the old system when you had a board of education. The mayor had put a couple of people on. The other two citywide offices had a couple of people. Borough presidents, one. I think that's right.
That's right.
And we didn't, I used to say, Ed Koch used to say he wanted 6. And I'd say, well, just give me 4, and I'll persuade somebody else to my point of view, and I'll manage. But none of us was able to get that done. But Mike did. And not that everybody is delighted with the Department of Education as it is today, but by God, you remember, some of you will, when they had TV shots of people in cabs and all handing forth envelopes full of money, selling superintendentships or whatever the hell they were selling. It was terrible. So things are a whole lot better today. Kids aren't perfect, not learning as quickly as we would wish, but I think that's the biggest thing, the most important thing. Obviously health care and police protection and all of that, but if we can get our kids educated, then we'll do fine.
The next question.
Hi, Mayor Dinkins.
Hi.
How are you? I'm Courtney Tate. I was in your class. I was SIPA 2011. And
I remember you got an A.
Of course. And I also always came to your office hours, pestering you for whatever reason. But Mayor Dinkins, I just wanted to ask two very simple questions, and they might require some time to answer. But one being best advice that you were ever given or that you would give to a young professional. And the second would be any commentary on the current conditions, all the happenings going down in Washington and their effect on all of America right now, and how you see that landscape unfolding and how you could better solve that problem.
Well,
Let's do the first question, and then the next person will get a question, because we can only have time for one more question. If you
well,
don't mind.
all I can tell you is that I say these days, as I always have, that being mayor of New York is the greatest job in the world. The only job that's better is the one Obama has. Of late, I'm wondering about that.
Right.
But no, I don't know what to do. My brother Charlie Rangel is in the Congress. I talked with him tonight, and he was explaining to me how he's got to be down there because who knows what they may do in terms of calling the Congress back in. But
Well, how about some
thank
advice
you.
for our students?
Well, I just think there's nothing more important than getting yourselves well educated. There's a Columbia magazine. What is it called? I just saw a copy today. It has on the cover is what's the name?
It's called the Columbia Magazine?
No. The cover. Where is Linda? What's Sheena Wright? Sheena Wright is the daughter of Deborah Fraser Howes, who was a teenage mother, has gone on to do all kinds of great and wonderful things. And the story is about Sheena, who now heads up, was it United Way?
United Way, right.
First black person, certainly first black woman ever. And it tells her story of how she got herself educated. And she obviously is very, very bright. But I thought to myself, damn, she is really good. I kid her all the time. I call her my lawyer. But I would urge you to get hold of that magazine. What's it called, Linda?
Columbia Today.
Columbia Today, okay. It's just out, hot off the press.
Let's take one last question.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor.
Hi.
Hi, my name is Sam Pierre. I'm an EMPA student, first year. I'm also a neophyte of the Good Black and Old Gold. And I am also the Director of African American Affairs for the current mayor, Michael Bloomberg. And in this role, when I first took the role, I was tasked to...
What did you do for Michael Bloomberg? What was that?
I'm currently his Director of African American Caribbean Affairs in the Community Affairs Unit.
Oh, in Community Affairs.
Community Affairs Unit,
Okay.
right. So I've been tasked with, well, in the last 2 years, I've been tasked with looking at neighborhoods such as East New York, Brownsville, where, where there are low-income families and trying to get them up to speed with the other neighborhoods, Fort Greene and New York City. So my question to you would be, what ideas or what things you think that we can put in place so that we can hand it off to the next administration, where they can be able to continue some of these initiatives to to revive some of these communities that aren't doing as well as some of the other ones?
Well, I don't know the answer to that, but we had something called Increase the Peace Corps, and there were one paid person and about 1,500 volunteers. They were the ones that helped us keep peace in the city during difficult times, including when Rodney King verdict came down, and there were riots all over the country except New York. And so I think that one needs to, not that you need to do it, recruit as many caring, bright, I say young often, but take some old folks too, and let them know that they can be helpful. I think we have an obligation, especially to our children. I argue that we don't own the planet, we hold it in trust for them. And good for what you're doing, sir. Thank you.
So let's take the last two questions consecutively. Why don't you both come up, ask your questions, so that we don't leave anybody out. And then we can get to the festivities and the signing of the books.
That's great. Hi, Mr. Mayor. My name is Fei. I'm from China, first-year SIPA student. You contributed significantly to the decrease of New York City crime rate. My question is about faith and values. So if you think about religion, I think it used to serve two purposes. One is to explain physical world, which is replaced by science now, and the other is to guide the value of society. And my question is, for people who are non-religious, what should be the role of government in guiding values? Should there be one, and how can the government do so?
Okay.
Thank you.
Let's take the second question, and then the mayor will respond.
I recently retired from an inspector general's office, and I'm very interested in your experience with campaign finance and the aspects where sources of money can present the possibility of corruption, particularly in light of the Citizens United decision that makes corporations able to make direct donations from their treasury, and the fact that in a few days there's going to be another hearing regarding totally removing all campaign finance limits from individual contributors. What do you feel about the potential for corruption of unlimited donations?
Okay.
Well, to take your question first, was freshest in my mind. It increases the chance for corruption if they remove those kinds of controls. I think that it's very unfortunate. Now, there have been instances wherein people have used their own money, and as Mike has done, he spent last election before last, he spent something like $100 million. Fortunately, he's a good guy. I understand not everybody's in love with him, but he is a good person. Keep in mind, he was a philanthropist before his involvement in government and politics, which says a lot for me. But it's also very possible for some people who can control things with their wealth to be bad guys. And so that's not a good thing. It's obviously a whole lot more one could say about this, but I'm glad you're there.
I
Now,
think that
what did the young lady?
About government and values. I think that your life.
Oh yeah. What if
what
can government do other than religion and whatnot? Well,
supporting your values.
you know, one doesn't need I'm a Christian. Esther is an Orthodox Jew. But one doesn't need, quote, religion per se to believe in fairness, to want to treat people as you would wish to be treated. And I think government can enact laws and rules that assist that. I guess it was Dr. King when they say that Lyndon Johnson told him that the time wasn't right for certain changes, and Dr. King said, "Mr. President, we'll make the time right." So government can do things to I guess the word is create the climate. Religion notwithstanding, because I do believe in the separation of church and state, but one need not have a religion to have a sense of fairness. And you know, if I say, well, we're going to divide this apple and between the two of us, and then I take 3/4 of it, you don't need to be steeped in religion to know that that's not fair. Well, listen, thank you all so much for coming.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I started by saying Mayor Dinkins is inspirational. I'll end by saying he's inspirational and brilliant, and we are so lucky in New York City to have had you as our mayor, and here at Columbia to have you on faculty. And now everybody buy that book.
Thank you. In? Okay. Youth. So much taught that to Davis all over the world.
That is nice to know. Thank you so much.